My guest at this time is Daniel Turner. He's the executive director of Power the Future. The group focuses primarily on the national energy debate, and one of its frequent adversaries in that area is billionaire climate activist Tom Steyer. Steyer is best known for his campaign to impeach President Trump. Mr. Turner also says that Steyer and other liberal donors poured money into the hotly contested Florida statewide races, both for Senate and the governor, and need to be examined very carefully as the controversial vote counting continues in Florida. Democrats say they're just making sure every vote is being counted. Republicans say laws are already clearly being violated, and there may well be an effort to steal the Senate race seemingly won Tuesday by outgoing Governor Rick Scott. And Daniel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Democrats say there's nothing illegal happening here. Rick Scott pointing out that Broward has discovered roughly 80,000 new votes since Tuesday night and overwhelmingly tilting towards the Democrats. But let's back up to the beginning of this. What's been the role of Tom Steyer and some of the other prominent Democratic donors in Florida this cycle?
Tom Steyer personally spent $14 million in Florida. So if there's a chance for a recount or a chance to suddenly discover new votes in Broward County, I can be sure the people who just spent $14 million of their boss's money are going to support that effort one way or another. But yeah, they saw Andrew Gillum as the real future of progressive environmental politics. He was a bright new figure, and they backed him heavily. And they're a bunch of sore losers now, and they're going to fight to try to make sure that the will of the people is reversed.
So even though most of the attention's on the Senate race, you're suggesting a big part of this is also about the governor's race?
Absolutely. I think this is about electing progressives in Florida. And so if they can cast doubt on all of Florida elections for the future, then that's money for them that's going to be well spent. They invested heavily in Gillum, and as a consequence, they invested in, obviously, the senator's race all the way down the party line to congressional seats as well. But they did this all across the country. Steyer has invested about $120 million this election cycle nationwide. And that's serious money, $120 million. He was not nearly as successful as he wanted to be. And so, yeah, you can be sure that he will fund any effort to reverse course.
Well, let's dig a little deeper on that then, because obviously it's not illegal to spend $14 million as long as you report everything and that sort of thing. Is there any evidence that Steyer and any other of these major donors have connections specifically to the controversy we're seeing in Broward and Palm Beach counties?
I haven't seen that yet, but our other good friend on the left, George Soros, funds a lot of this type of activism. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did a little bit of digging, we would see Soros' name popping up. He also has spent a considerable amount of money this cycle on progressive politics, progressive ideas. But more than candidates, Mr. Soros loves to fund progressive activism. A lot of the Antifa folks, a lot of the real crazy mob activism is funded by Soros. And so something like you're seeing in Broward County right now really feels like it's right out of the Soros playbook.
You mentioned that we don't have any evidence yet, and there's also not very much transparency here. It's one of the things that Governor Scott said was also illegal, both in terms of the vote count and watching the vote counting process. He said it was being restricted. And so those things are already illegal. But in terms of whether or not there's any chicanery in the actual vote counting, the vote totals, how do we actually know if anything's going on when there's not a lot of access here?
Exactly. I just saw a lot of things break on social media about the Republican Party, and the president even said that he is sending folks down there to watch. So I think we need more people, more eyes on this is a good thing and not a bad thing. The fact that a lot of what's happened right now has happened in back rooms, behind closed doors, that's never a good thing for the transparency of the voting system. And so I'm happy to see the president getting involved. I'm happy to see Governor Rick Scott has been very vocal today on social media, saying that he is calling for an investigation as well. The law of announcing how many ballots are left, of when ballots have to be registered, these laws are all really concrete, really specific, and well known. The fact that it's Friday afternoon and we're still discussing something that ended at 9 o'clock on Tuesday is pretty bizarre. For a first world country, this just smells of bad things.
We're talking with Daniel Turner, Executive Director at Power the Future. Were Republicans a little slow on the uptake here? Because as Rick Scott pointed out last night, he was up by almost 60,000 votes on election night, and as of his statement last night, it was 15,000. I don't even know where it stands right now.
Yeah, you know what? Something that always surprises me about politics, and I've been doing this for a good 20 years, is the right genuinely believes in the goodness of the American people and the system and fairness, and the left genuinely believes in win at all costs necessary. And so when it comes to things like elections, but the space that I engage in often, primarily, which is the energy space, we ultimately believe that good will prevail and that people will do what is right. But then we see a lot of nonsense. We see a lot of what's happening in Broward County. The left is ruthless, and the left does not like to lose. I mean, look at the end of 2016. The consequence was let's investigate for Russia and let's abolish the Electoral College. Look at the amount of people right now calling serious journalists saying we should consider abolishing the Senate because of what they call the quote-unquote Senate majority vote or the Senate popular vote. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think the Republicans are slow on the uptake because they are always surprised that the left is as ruthless as it is.
Just a minute or so left here, Daniel, and you talked about this a little bit at the start, but I just want to drill a little deeper, pun intended, on energy differences here between Ron DeSantis, who was declared the winner on Tuesday night. He's obviously a pretty conservative guy, and Andrew Gillum, who's a pretty darn liberal guy. So what's going to be the difference in Florida depending on who ultimately emerges here on energy policy?
Yeah, I wrote a piece in the Sun Sentinel that was published a few weeks ago on this specific issue. Florida is not a major energy producer, unlike like Texas or Alaska or New Mexico, but Florida is a major energy state, especially when it comes to refineries. And someone like Gillum, who is a radical leftist, would have been bad for Florida's future. The piece that I wrote was about preparedness for when it comes to pipelines. Mr. Gillum led some of the protests to shut down pipeline construction. Does he not know that pipelines survive hurricanes a lot better than tankers and railroads? And so you're jeopardizing the future of Florida's hurricane preparedness. And in a state like Florida, you've got to be prepared for hurricanes. And so it's a sigh of relief that a radical like Andrew Gillum is not going to be in charge of the state's energy policy.
Well, we'll certainly keep watching, and we'll see how this all shakes out. If those of us with long enough memories know it took 36 days back during Bush v. Gore, We'll see how long it takes in this situation, although the margin is quite a bit different, or at least it was a couple days ago. Daniel, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Have a great weekend.
Daniel Turner is Executive Director at Power the Future. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.